The morning fog hung thick over the mountain passes as Colonel Sarah Martinez adjusted her field glasses one final time. 3 months of intelligence gathering had led to this moment. The enemy compound below buzzed with activity, completely unaware that their most wanted target was watching from above. Sarah had earned her reputation the hard way. Born in a small border town where conflict was as common as sunrise, she learned early that survival meant being smarter and faster than everyone else. Her father, a retired sergeant, taught her to shoot before she could properly hold a rifle. Her mother, a field medic, showed her how to think under pressure when lives hung in the balance. The war had been raging for 2 years now. What started as border disputes had escalated into full-scale conflict between two nations. Sarah commanded the 47th Mountain Regiment, a unit known for impossible missions and impossible odds. They called her the Ghost of the Highlands because she could appear anywhere, strike hard, and vanish before the enemy knew what hit them. But today was different. Today, she was the hunted one. The intelligence report had been clear. General Viktor Petrov, the enemy's most decorated commander, had put a price on her head. 5 million in gold. Dead or alive, though they clearly preferred dead. The bounty had attracted every mercenary and assassin within 1,000 miles. Sarah's own command had intercepted communications showing at least 12 different groups already moving to claim the prize. Sarah smiled grimly as she watched the compound through her scope. Let them come. She had survived worse odds. Her radio crackled softly. Ghost Leader, this is Raven. We have movement on the eastern approach. Looks like our friend from the south decided to make their play early. Sarah keyed her radio twice in acknowledgement. Captain James Webb, call sign Raven, led her advance reconnaissance team. If he said there was movement, she believed it without question. The man could spot a sparrow's nest in a thunderstorm. Through her binoculars, Sarah could see the source of Webb's concern. A convoy of unmarked vehicles was winding up the mountain road toward the compound. Too clean to be locals, too well-organized to be bandits. These were professionals. The Crimson Wolves, if she had a guess. A mercenary group that specialized in high-value targets. Their leader, a former Special Forces operator named Klaus Hoffman, had a reputation for taking impossible contracts and, somehow, making them work. Sarah had studied their methods during her training at the War College. They were good, very good, but they had one weakness that Sarah intended to exploit. They always played by the rules of conventional warfare. Sarah had stopped playing by those rules a long time ago. All stations, this is Ghost Leader, she whispered in her radio. Crimson Package is approaching the front door. Execute Operation Mousetrap in 15 minutes. Raven, are your snipers in position? Affirmative, Ghost Leader. Eagle's Nest and Hawk's Perch both report ready. We have overlapping fields of fire on the compound and the access road. Sarah checked her watch. 0630 hours. Perfect timing. The morning shift change at the enemy compound would create exactly the confusion she needed. General Petrov had made his first mistake by putting a bounty on her head. He was about to make his second by underestimating what she would do about it. The compound below housed more than just General Petrov. According to her intelligence network, 3 other high-ranking enemy officers were meeting there today. General Anton Kozlov, the architect of the brutal siege of Riverside City. Colonel Elena Vasquez, whose chemical weapons program had violated every treaty in the book. And Major Boris Volkov, the man responsible for the massacre at Pine Ridge Hospital. Sarah had been hunting these 4 for months. They represented the enemy's entire strategic command structure. Take them out, and the war effort would collapse into chaos. But they were smart enough never to gather in one place. Until now, greed had accomplished what 2 years of warfare could not. The promise of claiming her bounty had drawn them together like moths to a flame. The first explosion shattered the morning quiet. Sarah watched through her scope as the Crimson Wolves' lead vehicle disappeared in a ball of fire and smoke. Webb's demo team had placed the charges perfectly. The narrow mountain road offered no escape route. The convoy was trapped. But Sarah wasn't watching the road. Her attention focused on the compound as figures in enemy uniforms rushed to defensive positions. She counted muzzle flashes from 4 different buildings. Automatic weapons fire echoed across the valley as the Crimson Wolves fought back against what they thought was an ambush. They had no idea they were dancing to Sarah's tune. "Ghost Leader, this is Falcon," came another voice on the radio. Lieutenant Maria Santos, her communication specialist, was monitoring enemy frequencies from a hidden position 2 miles away. Enemy command is requesting immediate reinforcement. They think the compound is under direct assault by a full regiment. Sarah smiled. The beauty of her plan was its simplicity. The Crimson Wolves thought they were hunting her. The enemy compound thought they were under attack by the mercenaries. Both sides would exhaust themselves fighting each other, leaving the real targets vulnerable. Through her scope, Sarah watched a figure emerge from the main building. Even at this distance, she recognized General Petrov's distinctive swagger. The man who had ordered her death was about to learn why that had been a mistake. But first, she needed to thin the herd. Sarah keyed her radio to a different frequency, one that she knew the Crimson Wolves monitored. "Unknown mercenary force, this is Colonel Martinez. You are attacking a strategic position under my command. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came within seconds, crackling with static and anger. "Martinez? This is Hoffman. You just killed 6 of my men. I'm going to collect that bounty and add your scalp to my wall." "You're welcome to try," Sarah replied calmly. "But first, you might want to check your 6 o'clock. The second phase of her plan unfolded like clockwork. Web sniper teams opened fire from their concealed positions, targeting both the mercenaries and the compound defenders. To each side, it looked like the other was reinforcing their attack. The crossfire intensified as confusion spread. Sarah waited for the chaos to reach its peak before making her move. Slinging her rifle across her back, she began the treacherous descent down the cliff face toward the compound. This was the part of the plan that made even her most trusted officers nervous. She would be alone, outnumbered 50-1, with no backup and no escape route. Exactly how she preferred it. The rock face offered plenty of handholds for someone with her training, but one wrong move would mean a 100-foot fall onto jagged stones. Sarah moved with practiced ease, her attention split between the descent and the battle raging below. The Crimson Wolves had rallied from the initial ambush and were pushing toward the compound gates. The enemy defenders were falling back to prepared positions inside the walls. Perfect. The confusion would provide the cover she needed to reach her primary target. Sarah dropped the final 10 feet into a drainage ditch that ran along the compound's eastern wall. The concrete channel was dry except for a few inches of stagnant water that muffled her footsteps. According to the intelligence reports, this drain connected to the compound's basement levels through a maintenance access that had been forgotten during recent security upgrades. The steel grate covering the drain entrance had been cut through during her team's reconnaissance mission 3 days ago. Sarah squeezed through the opening and found herself in a narrow tunnel that smelled of rust and decay. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the concrete walls as she made her way deeper into the compound's foundation. Her memorized layout of the building proved accurate. After 50 meters, the tunnel opened into a maintenance room filled with pipes and electrical panels. The sound of gunfire echoed from somewhere above, but down here, Sarah felt like she was in the eye of a hurricane. The service elevator was exactly where the blueprints indicated. Sarah checked her watch as she pressed the button for the 3rd floor. 0715 hours. The battle outside would continue for at least another 30 minutes before either side gained a decisive advantage. More than enough time for what she had in mind. The elevator opened into a corridor lined with offices. Sarah moved silently toward the conference room, where her intelligence indicated the enemy leadership would be coordinating their defense. Each step brought her closer to the moment she had been planning for months. The sound of voices grew louder as she approached the target room. Through the slightly open door, she could see General Petrov gesturing angrily at a tactical display while 3 other officers studied reports. All 4 of her targets, exactly as predicted. Sarah smiled as she reached for the door handle. The hunters were about to become the hunted. But as her hand touched the metal, a new sound reached her ears. Footsteps in the corridor behind her. Heavy boots, moving with military precision. Someone was coming, and they would spot her within seconds. Sarah's mind raced through her options. The conference room contained 4 armed enemy officers. The corridor behind her held at least 2 more hostiles. Her escape route was compromised, her backup was miles away, and she was completely surrounded. For most soldiers, this would be the end of the mission. For Sarah Martinez, it was just another day at the office. She drew her sidearm and prepared to do what she did best. The ghost of the Highlands was about to remind everyone why they feared her name. The footsteps grew closer as Sarah pressed herself against the wall beside the conference room door. Through the crack, she could still see General Petrov and his officers, completely unaware that death stood 3 feet away. The irony was perfect. The man who had ordered her assassination was about to meet the very person he had tried to kill. Sarah's radio crackled once, very softly. Webb's voice, barely a whisper. Ghost leader, enemy reinforcements approaching your position from the north stairwell. Estimate 4 hostiles, heavily armed. Sarah keyed her radio twice in acknowledgement, then switched it to silent mode. The next few minutes would determine whether she completed her mission or joined the long list of soldiers who had tried and failed to end this war. The conference room door was still slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could hear General Petrov's voice clearly now. The bounty on Martinez was the perfect bait. Once we eliminate her, the mountain forces will collapse within a week. The war will finally be ours. Colonel Vasquez spoke next. Hoffman's mercenaries are proving more effective than expected. They've breached the outer perimeter. Let them, General Kozlov replied. They're doing our work for us. When the fighting ends, we'll collect Martinez's body from whoever survives. Sarah's jaw tightened. These 4 had caused so much suffering, destroyed so many lives, and now they sat here casually discussing her death as if she were already defeated. It was time to correct that assumption. The footsteps in the corridor stopped directly outside the conference room. Sarah heard the soft click of a weapon being readied. Whoever was out there knew she was here. The element of surprise was gone, but that didn't mean the mission was over. Sarah made her choice. Instead of waiting for the enemy to act, she would take control of the situation. In one fluid motion, she kicked open the conference room door and dove inside, rolling behind an overturned table as gunfire erupted in the corridor behind her. The 4 enemy officers spun toward her in shock. General Petrov's hand moved toward his holstered pistol, but Sarah was already moving. Her first shot took out the room's lights, plunging everything into semi-darkness. Her second shot shattered the window, providing an alternate escape route if needed. Colonel Sarah Martinez, she announced calmly, her voice cutting through the confusion. I believe you gentlemen have been looking for me. The room erupted in chaos as all 4 officers dove for cover while trying to draw their weapons. But Sarah had spent months studying their files, learning their habits, anticipating their reactions. She knew exactly how each of them would respond to a surprise attack. General Petrov would move right toward the wall, where he kept a backup weapon. Colonel Vasquez would go left, toward the communications equipment to call for help. Major Volkov would drop to the floor and try to crawl toward the door. General Kozlov would stand his ground and try to take command of the situation. Sarah was ready for all of them. Her third shot found General Kozlov's center mass before he could bark his first order. The architect of the Riverside siege collapsed without a sound. Her fourth shot sparked off the communications console as Colonel Vasquez reached for the radio, sending her diving away in panic. You killed thousands of civilians with your chemical weapons, Sarah called out to Vasquez. Did you think there would be no consequences? The sound of combat in the corridor was intensifying. Sarah's surprise entry had confused the enemy soldiers, and they were now firing at shadows while trying to figure out what was happening. The confusion wouldn't last long, but it didn't need to. Major Volkov, made his move toward the door, exactly as Sarah had predicted. Her fifth shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a filing cabinet. "Pine Ridge Hospital," she said simply. "Remember that name?" Volkov's eyes widened with recognition, and fear before the pain took hold. The massacre at the hospital had been his idea, his operation. Now he was learning what it felt like to be the victim instead of the perpetrator. That left two targets. General Petrov had reached his backup weapon and was trying to get a clear shot. Colonel Vasquez was still trying to reach the communications equipment to call for reinforcement. Both were running out of time. Sarah's radio crackled despite being set to silent mode. Webb's voice, urgent now. "Ghost Leader, Crimson Wolves have breached the building. Multiple hostiles converging on your floor." The situation was getting complicated. Sarah had her targets cornered, but the building was filling with enemy forces from two different factions. Time for the final phase of her plan. "General Petrov," she called out, "you put a bounty on my head. 5 million in gold, wasn't it? You won't live to collect it." Petrov snarled back, firing blindly in her direction. "I already have," Sarah replied. "Did you really think I would come here alone?" The lie came easily, but it served its purpose. She could see doubt creeping into the enemy officers' faces. If she wasn't here alone, where was her backup? How many soldiers were already in the building? The answer came from an unexpected source. The conference room's remaining window exploded inward as a smoke grenade bounced across the floor. Sarah smiled grimly. Webb had been monitoring her radio frequency and had taken the initiative to provide covering fire from his sniper position. Thick gray smoke filled the room within seconds. Sarah moved through the haze like a ghost, her years of training allowing her to navigate by memory and instinct. The enemy officers were blind and disoriented, firing at sounds and shadows. Sarah found General Petrov first. The man who had ordered her death was crouched behind an overturned chair, his backup weapon shaking in his hands as he tried to peer through the smoke. She placed the barrel of her pistol against his temple. "This is for every soldier who died because of your orders," she whispered. The shot was muffled by the smoke and the continuing gunfire in the corridor. General Petrov slumped forward without a sound. Colonel Vasquez was still trying to reach the communications console when Sarah found her. The woman who had used chemical weapons against civilians was crawling across the floor, coughing from the smoke that filled her lungs. "How does it feel?" Sarah asked, grabbing Vasquez by the collar. "Can't breathe? Can't see? This is what your chemical weapons did to children." Vasquez tried to speak, but the smoke had damaged her voice. Sarah didn't wait for an answer. Justice had been delayed too long already. The smoke was beginning to clear as Sarah made her way toward the shattered window. 3 of her 4 primary targets were down. Major Volkov was still alive, but wounded badly enough that he wouldn't be giving orders anytime soon. The mission was 90% complete, but the building was still full of hostile forces, and Sarah's escape route was compromised. The Crimson Wolves had reached her floor and were moving methodically through the rooms. Enemy soldiers were converging from the opposite direction. She was trapped between 2 forces that both wanted her dead. Sarah reached the window and looked out at the valley below. The drop was substantial, but not impossible. More importantly, Webb's sniper team had positioned themselves to provide covering fire for exactly this scenario. Her radio crackled one final time. "Ghost Leader, this is Raven. Package delivery complete. Your ride is waiting in the courtyard." Sarah smiled as she saw the helicopter rising from behind the ridgeline. Her extraction team had been waiting for her signal. The mission was complete, but the war was far from over. As she prepared to rappel down the building's exterior wall, Sarah took one last look at the conference room. 4 enemy officers had gathered here to plan her death and celebrate their anticipated victory. 3 of them would never leave this room. The 4th would spend months in a hospital bed, assuming he survived his wounds. The bounty hunters and mercenaries could keep searching for their prize. The Ghost of the Highlands had other plans. The war had just taken a decisive turn, and Sarah Martinez intended to make sure it stayed turned. She disappeared through the window as the first Crimson Wolf mercenaries burst into the smoke-filled conference room. By the time they realized what had happened, she was already halfway down the building's wall, moving toward her extraction point and her next mission. The hunt was far from over. It had only just begun. The extraction helicopter lifted off from the compound courtyard just as the first mortar rounds began falling. Sarah Martinez secured her harness and looked back at the burning building where 3 enemy generals would never give another order. The mission had been a success, but she knew the real war was just beginning. Captain Webb handed her a tactical radio as they gained altitude. "Command wants a full debrief as soon as we reach base," he reported. "Also, there's been a development with the bounty situation." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of development?" "The 5 million just became 10 million. And it's not just the enemy anymore. Apparently, some very powerful people weren't happy about what happened to the compound today." The helicopter banked sharply to avoid anti-aircraft fire from the valley below. Sarah could see smoke rising from multiple locations across the battlefield. The elimination of 3 enemy generals had already started causing chaos in their command structure. Reports were coming in of entire divisions halting their advances, waiting for new orders that would never come. But Sarah's satisfaction was tempered by Webb's news. 10 million in gold would attract attention from mercenary groups across 3 continents. The Crimson Wolves had been professionals, but they were just the beginning. Now, she would have to deal with some of the most dangerous people on Earth. "Who else is hunting me now?" she asked. Webb consulted his tablet. "Intelligence reports at least 6 new groups mobilizing. The Iron Serpents out of Eastern Europe, Black River Company from Africa, the Jade Dragons from Asia, and 3 smaller outfits we're still identifying. Plus, there are rumors that someone has hired the Phantom." Sarah's blood went cold. The Phantom was a legend in military circles, a solo operator who had never failed to eliminate a target. Some said he was former Special Forces. Others claimed he was a government assassin gone rogue. Nobody knew his real identity, but everyone knew his reputation. If the Phantom was involved, the game had just become much more dangerous. The helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Sentinel just as the sun was setting. Sarah's home base was built into a mountain valley that provided natural protection from air attacks and surveillance satellites. The facility housed nearly 1,000 soldiers, but it could disappear into the landscape at a moment's notice if the enemy got too close. General Marcus Thompson was waiting for her on the landing pad. Sarah's commanding officer was a career soldier who had served in conflicts on 4 different continents. He was also one of the few people who knew the full scope of what she had accomplished at the compound. "Hell of a thing you pulled off today," Thompson said as they walked toward the command center. 3 enemy generals in one operation. The intelligence boys are calling it the most successful targeted elimination in modern warfare history. "It's not over yet," Sarah replied. "Volkov is still alive, and the bounty situation is getting complicated." Thompson nodded grimly. "That's why I called you in for immediate debrief. We need to discuss your next move before every gun for hire on the planet shows up on our doorstep." The command center buzzed with activity as staff officers processed intelligence reports from across the front lines. Large screens displayed tactical maps showing friendly and enemy positions updated in real time by reconnaissance teams and satellite imagery. Sarah could see the immediate effects of her mission. Enemy forces that had been advancing steadily for weeks were now stationary, waiting for orders from commanders who would never give them. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base intelligence officer, briefed Sarah on the developing situation. The elimination of Generals Petrov, Kozlov, and Vasquez has created a leadership vacuum in enemy forces. Their chain of command is fracturing as subordinates compete for control. However, this success has also made you the most wanted person in this conflict zone. Hayes brought up a series of photographs on the main display. These are confirmed mercenary leaders now hunting for the bounty. Klaus Hoffman and the remaining Crimson Wolves are regrouping for another attempt. The Iron Serpents are being led by Viktor Antonov, former Russian Spetsnaz with over 40 confirmed kills. Black River Company is under the command of Jackson Stone, ex-Delta Force, who went private after a classified incident in Syria. Sarah studied the faces on screen. Each represented a different approach to hunting human targets. Hoffman was methodical and used overwhelming force. Antonov preferred stealth and precision strikes. Stone specialized in psychological warfare and would try to break her mentally before moving in for the kill. "What about the Phantom?" she asked. General Thompson exchanged a look with Colonel Hayes. "That's where things get complicated. We have reason to believe the Phantom is already in the area. 3 of our listening posts went dark in the last 6 hours. No explosions, no gunfire, no distress calls. They just stopped reporting." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Phantom's signature was his ability to eliminate targets without leaving any trace of how he had done it. Entire military units had vanished without firing a shot. Security cameras would show guards at their posts one moment and empty rooms the next. If he was here, the situation had escalated beyond anything she had faced before. "I need to see the intelligence reports on Major Volkov," Sarah said. "If he's the only surviving member of their leadership council, he might try to rebuild their command structure." Hayes pulled up medical reports from a compound raid. Volkov suffered a serious shoulder wound, but is expected to survive. He was evacuated to a secure medical facility approximately 60 kilometers east of the compound. Heavy security, but not impossible to penetrate. "Absolutely not," General Thompson interrupted. "You've already taken enough risks. We need to focus on keeping you alive, not sending you after another target." Sarah shook her head. "Volkov knows their entire command structure, their plans, their backup protocols. If he recovers and takes command, everything we accomplished today becomes meaningless. Plus, as long as he's alive, he'll keep funding bounty hunters to come after me." The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from the perimeter guard. Sergeant Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. "Command, we have multiple vehicles approaching the main gate. Unmarked convoy, heavily armed. They're flying a white flag, but maintaining combat formation." Sarah and Thompson rushed to the observation deck overlooking the base's main entrance. Through powerful binoculars, Sarah could see a convoy of black SUVs arranged in a defensive pattern. Professional work, but the white flag suggested they wanted to talk rather than fight. "Let me guess," Sarah said. "Someone wants to make a deal." A figure emerged from the lead vehicle. Even at distance, Sarah could see military bearing in the way he moved. The man approached the gate alone, hands visible, clearly announcing his peaceful intentions. "This is Colonel Marcus Reed," came the radio transmission. "I'm here to speak with Colonel Martinez under terms of parley. I represent interested parties who believe we can reach a mutually beneficial arrangement." Thompson looked at Sarah with concern. "You don't have to do this. We can send him away." "No," Sarah replied. "If someone is willing to come here personally, I want to hear what they have to say. Maybe we can solve the bounty problem without having to kill every mercenary on the planet." The meeting was arranged in the base's secure conference room. Colonel Reed turned out to be a lean man in his 50s with the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in conflict zones. He wore civilian clothes, but his posture and manner screamed military experience. "Colonel Martinez," Reed began, "I'll get straight to the point. My employers are willing to offer you $20 million to walk away from this conflict. Take your unit, disappear into the mountains, and let the war end through conventional means." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Who are your employers?" "People who have significant investments in maintaining the current balance of power. Your recent activities have upset calculations that took years to establish. They would prefer to resolve this situation through negotiation rather than elimination. And if I refuse..." Reed's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. "Then the $20 million becomes a bounty instead of a payment. And I can assure you, the people hunting you would make the current threats look like amateur hour." General Thompson started to speak, but Sarah held up a hand to silence him. She studied Reed carefully, looking for tells that would reveal his true intentions. The man was a professional, but He was also delivering a threat disguised as an offer. "Here's my counterproposal," Sarah said finally. "You and your employers can take your money and leave. I'll continue prosecuting this war according to my conscience and my orders. And if you send any more mercenaries after me, I'll start hunting down your employers instead of just their hired help." Reed smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That would be unwise, Colonel. My employers have resources that dwarf anything you've faced so far. The Phantom was just the beginning. Then, they should have thought of that before putting a price on my head." The negotiation was clearly over. Reed stood smoothly and adjusted his jacket. "I'll convey your response. I hope you understand what you're choosing." "I understand perfectly," Sarah replied. "I'm choosing to finish what I started." After Reed left, the command staff gathered to assess the new threat level. The involvement of unknown powerful interests explained how the bounty had reached $10 million so quickly. Someone with serious resources wanted Sarah eliminated, and they were willing to pay any price to make it happen. "We need to move the base," Colonel Hayes recommended. "If they have the resources Reed claimed, they can find us here." Sarah shook her head. "Moving would take too long and leave us vulnerable during the transition. Besides, I don't plan to wait here for them to come to us." "What do you have in mind?" Thompson asked. Sarah moved to the tactical display and began highlighting enemy positions. "Major Volkov is the key to their remaining command structure. If I can reach him before he fully recovers, I can end this war and eliminate the reason for the bounty. But it has to be soon, before Reed's employers can mobilize their resources." Thompson studied the map. The medical facility is heavily defended. Multiple layers of security, air defense systems, quick reaction forces. It would take a full regiment to assault that position. "Good thing I'm not planning to assault it," Sarah replied. "I'm going to walk in the front door." The plan she outlined was audacious even by her standards. Instead of trying to fight through the facility's defenses, she would infiltrate as a medical transfer. Her team had captured enemy medical transport vehicles during previous operations. With proper documentation and the right cover story, she could get inside the facility before anyone realized who she was. "It's suicide," Webb protested. "Even if you get inside, how do you get out? The moment you eliminate Volkov, every guard in the facility will be hunting you." "That's why I won't be eliminating him," Sarah explained. "I'm going to extract him." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah wasn't planning to kill Major Volkov. She was going to kidnap him and bring him back for interrogation. The intelligence value would be enormous, but the risks were astronomical. "Sarah," General Thompson said quietly, "you're talking about penetrating a heavily fortified enemy medical facility, kidnapping a high-value prisoner, and escaping through multiple security cordons. And you want to do it while every mercenary group on the planet is hunting you." "When you put it like that, it does sound challenging," Sarah admitted. "But consider the alternative. Volkov recovers, rebuilds their command structure, and we're back to fighting a conventional war that could last years. Meanwhile, I'm constantly looking over my shoulder for the next assassination attempt." Captain Webb leaned forward. "What about the Phantom? If he's really in the area, this operation could be walking into a trap." Sarah had been thinking about that problem since the briefing began. The Phantom's presence changed everything, but it also created an opportunity. If he was hunting her, she might be able to turn the tables and eliminate him during the Volkov extraction. "The Phantom is a solo operator," she said. "He works alone because it maintains his operational security. But that also means he has no backup if something goes wrong. If I can force him to reveal himself during the extraction, I might be able to deal with him permanently." The discussion continued for another hour as they refined the operational details. The medical facility was located in a valley surrounded by steep hills, with only one road providing access. The building itself was a converted military hospital with reinforced construction and multiple security checkpoints. Guards rotated every 4 hours, and visitor access was strictly controlled. But Sarah had noticed something in the intelligence photos that offered an opportunity. The facility's helipad was positioned on the roof, separated from the main security perimeter. If she could reach Volkov's floor and get him to the roof, extraction by helicopter was possible. "I'll need a full medical team for cover," Sarah told the assembled staff. "Real doctors and nurses who can maintain the deception if anyone gets suspicious. Plus technical support to handle their security systems and communications." Dr. Elena Foster, the base's chief medical officer, volunteered immediately. "I've worked in battlefield hospitals under enemy fire. This won't be my first dangerous assignment." Lieutenant Santos raised her hand. "I can handle their communications and electronic security. Give me 30 minutes inside their system, and I can create whatever documentation you need." Sarah felt the familiar surge of confidence that came from working with her handpicked team. These people had followed her through impossible missions before. If anyone could make this work, it would be them. "We move tomorrow night," Sarah decided. "That gives us 24 hours to prepare and positions us to hit the facility during their shift change." Questions. Colonel Hayes looked troubled. "What about Reed and his employers?" "They'll be monitoring the situation. If they realize what you're planning, then we'll deal with that when it happens," Sarah replied. "Right now, our priority is ending this war before it consumes any more lives." As the briefing ended and the staff dispersed to begin preparations, General Thompson pulled Sarah aside. "I want you to know that I think you're making the right call, even if it scares the hell out of me. But I need to ask, are you sure this is about ending the war? Or is this about proving that nobody can put a price on your head?" Sarah considered the question seriously. The honest answer was probably both. The war needed to end, and Major Volkov was the key to making that happen. But she couldn't deny the personal satisfaction she would feel in demonstrating that threats and bounties would only make her more dangerous, not less. "Does it matter?" she asked finally. "Either way, the mission serves our strategic objectives." Thompson nodded slowly. "Just remember that revenge is a luxury we can't afford to indulge. Stay focused on the mission, not the personal score." Sarah appreciated the reminder, but she had already made her choice. Tomorrow night, she would walk into the heart of enemy territory to capture one of their most valuable assets. The bounty hunters and assassins could follow if they wanted. She would be ready for them. The Ghost of the Highlands had more work to do. The stolen enemy medical transport rolled through the checkpoint at exactly 2,147 hours. Sarah Martinez sat in the passenger seat wearing the uniform of an enemy medical corps lieutenant, her face hidden behind surgical mask and cap. Dr. Elena Foster drove the vehicle with the calm competence of someone who had navigated war zones for 15 years. In the back of the transport, Lieutenant Santos and Sergeant First Class David Kim posed as medical technicians. Their equipment cases contained enough firepower to level a city block, but to the checkpoint guards, they looked like standard medical supplies being transferred between facilities. "Papers are in order," the guard captain announced after examining their forged documentation. "Proceed to Medical Base 7. Dr. Petrov is expecting you." Sarah's blood chilled at the name. Dr. Anton Petrov was General Viktor Petrov's younger brother, the man she had killed at the compound 3 days ago. If Anton knew about his brother's death, this mission could turn into a massacre within minutes. The transport moved through the facility's inner perimeter as Sarah studied the building layout through the windshield. The intelligence reports had been accurate. 3 stories of reinforced concrete, guard towers at each corner, and a rooftop helipad that represented their only realistic escape route. Major Boris Volkov was being treated on the 2nd floor, room 237. According to intercepted communications, he was recovering faster than expected and would be transferred to a secure command bunker within 48 hours. Tonight was their only chance to reach him before he disappeared into a facility they could never penetrate. "Ghost Leader, this is Overwatch," came Webb's voice through Sarah's concealed radio earpiece. "Package is in position. We have eyes on the building and clear fields of fire for extraction." Sarah clicked her tongue twice in acknowledgement. Webb's sniper team was positioned on the ridgeline overlooking the facility, ready to provide covering fire when things went sideways. and they would go sideways. Operations like this always did. Dr. Foster parked the transport in the designated area and began unloading equipment with practiced efficiency. To any observer, they were simply another medical team performing routine patient transfers. The deception was perfect, which made Sarah wonder why every instinct was screaming that something was wrong. The answer came as they entered the building's main lobby. Dr. Anton Petrov was waiting for them personally, flanked by 2 guards and wearing an expression that suggested he knew exactly who had just walked into his facility. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, he said quietly, using her cover name. How convenient that you've come to visit our facility tonight. Sarah's hand moved slightly toward her concealed sidearm, but Dr. Petrov held up a hand. Please, no violence in my hospital. We have patients recovering from serious injuries. Surely we could discuss this situation like civilized people. Dr. Foster stepped forward smoothly. Doctor, I think there's been some confusion. We're here for a routine medical transfer. Our authorization is perfectly forged, Dr. Petrov interrupted. Impressive work, actually. If I hadn't been expecting you, I might have been fooled. The lobby suddenly felt much smaller as Sarah realized they had walked into a trap. The guards were positioned to cut off their retreat to the transport. More security personnel were probably moving to surround the building. In trying to capture Volkov, she had delivered herself directly to the enemy. How did you know? Sarah asked, buying time while she assessed their tactical situation. Dr. Petrov smiled coldly. My brother told me about your reputation for impossible missions. When he was killed at the compound, I knew you would come for Major Volkov eventually. It was simply a matter of waiting for you to make your move. So, this is about revenge for your brother? Partially, Dr. Petrov admitted. But primarily, this is about the $20 million bounty. My facility needs funding, and your death would solve that problem quite permanently. Sarah noticed that Dr. Foster had positioned herself to provide covering fire if needed. Santos and Kim were still by the transport, ready to retrieve heavier weapons if the situation escalated. They might be trapped, but they weren't helpless. Where is Major Volkov? Sarah asked. Oh, he's here. In fact, he's quite eager to meet the famous ghost of the Highlands. He has some personal business to discuss with you regarding Pine Ridge Hospital. The mention of the hospital massacre sent cold fury through Sarah's veins. Volkov had ordered the attack that killed 47 wounded soldiers and medical personnel. He had violated every rule of warfare and murdered people who posed no threat to anyone. Take me to him, Sarah said. Dr. Petrov looked surprised. Just like that? No demands, no threats, no desperate escape attempt. You want to trade my life for $20 million. Volkov wants revenge for Pine Ridge. I want to end this war before more people die. Let's all get what we want. The doctor studied her face for a long moment, searching for deception. Sarah kept her expression neutral, even though her mind was racing through contingency plans. She hadn't survived this long by giving up when situations turned against her. Very well, Dr. Petrov decided. But first, your team surrenders their weapons. All of them. Sarah nodded to her people. Dr. Foster, Santos, and Kim reluctantly placed their visible sidearms on a nearby table. The guards moved to collect the weapons, while additional security personnel emerged from concealment positions around the lobby. But they didn't search the medical equipment cases. The elevator ride to the second floor was tense and silent. Dr. Petrov watched Sarah carefully while his guards maintained ready positions. Through the elevator's small window, Sarah could see the facility's grounds illuminated by security lighting. Everything looked normal, but she knew Webb's sniper team was out there somewhere, waiting for her signal. Room 237 was larger than standard hospital rooms, clearly designed for high-ranking patients. Major Boris Volkov sat propped up in bed, his wounded shoulder immobilized but his eyes alert and filled with hatred. Colonel Sarah Martinez, he said in accented English. The butcher of Pine Ridge comes to visit her victims. Sarah stepped closer to the bed. I wasn't at Pine Ridge. That was your operation, your orders, your war crime. My orders, yes, but your war. If you hadn't started this mountain resistance, those soldiers would still be alive. The twisted logic was typical of someone who refused to take responsibility for his actions. Volkov had ordered the massacre of wounded soldiers and blamed their deaths on the people who opposed his invasion. Sarah had met his type before, and she knew that reasoning with him was pointless. Dr. Petrov, Sarah said without taking her eyes off Volkov, I want to propose a modification to our arrangement. What kind of modification? You get the bounty money. I get to ask Major Volkov some questions about enemy operations. Everyone wins. Volkov laughed bitterly. You think I will give you military secrets? I would rather die than help you kill more of my soldiers. Then, let's test that theory, Sarah replied. Before anyone could react, she grabbed the four stand next to Volkov's bed and swung it at Dr. Petrov. The doctor stumbled backward into one of the guards while Sarah dove toward the window. Her shoulder hit the reinforced glass with enough force to crack it, but not shatter it completely. The room erupted in chaos as the guards tried to subdue her without hitting their own people. Sarah rolled behind a medical cabinet and keyed the emergency transmitter hidden in her collar. 3 short bursts that would tell Webb to begin the extraction sequence. Restrain her, Dr. Petrov shouted. We need her alive for the bounty. Sarah smiled grimly as she heard the distant sound of rotor blades approaching. Her extraction helicopter was 2 minutes away, but she still needed to reach the roof. And she still needed to complete her mission. The guards advanced cautiously, trying to corner her behind the medical cabinet. Sarah waited until they were committed to their approach before making her move. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and triggered it, filling the room with thick chemical fog. Using the confusion, Sarah moved toward Volkov's bed. If she couldn't extract him for interrogation, she could at least ensure he never gave another order. But Volkov wasn't in his bed anymore. Through the chemical fog, Sarah could see that someone had moved him during the chaos. Dr. Petrov's voice came from near the doorway. Major Volkov is no longer your concern. Your only concern now is staying alive long enough to face your executioner. Sarah's blood went cold. There was only one person Dr. Petrov could be referring to. The Phantom had been waiting for her here, using Volkov as bait to draw her into a trap. The chemical fog was starting to clear when Sarah heard a new sound. A soft whistle, barely audible above the commotion in the room. She threw herself sideways just as a crossbow bolt buried itself in the wall where her head had been a moment before. The Phantom was in the room. Sarah grabbed the nearest medical instrument and hurled it toward the sound of the whistle. The metallic crash told her she had hit something, but probably not her target. The Phantom was too skilled to be taken down by a desperate throw. Impressive reflexes, came a voice from the shadows near the window. But reflexes won't save you from what's coming next. Sarah couldn't see him, but she could hear the slight accent in his speech. Eastern European, possibly Russian. The voice was calm, professional, without any emotion or anger. This wasn't personal for him. It was just business. The famous Phantom, Sarah called out. I was starting to think you were a myth. Myths don't collect $20 million bounties, he replied. Though I admit, you've provided more entertainment than most targets. Sarah was moving as she spoke, using the conversation to mask her position. The room's layout was burned into her memory from the intelligence briefings. If she could reach the supply closet, she might find something useful. Why the crossbow? She asked. Seems old-fashioned for someone with your reputation. Silent, reliable, and it leaves distinctive wounds. My signature, you might say. Sarah reached the supply closet and quietly opened the door. Inside, she found what she was looking for, a small oxygen tank that could be weaponized if needed. But first, she needed to locate her target. The helicopter sounds were getting louder. Webb would be positioning for rooftop extraction, but Sarah was still trapped on the second floor with the most dangerous assassin on the planet. She needed to change the tactical situation quickly. Sarah grabbed the oxygen tank and hurled it through the cracked window. The glass finally shattered completely, letting in the night air and the sound of approaching aircraft. More importantly, it created the opening she needed. Overwatch. This is Ghost Leader, she whispered into her collar transmitter. Phantom is in room 237. Request immediate fire support. The response was instantaneous. Webb's rifle spoke from the ridgeline, and the room's overhead lights exploded in showers of sparks. The sudden darkness leveled the playing field between Sarah and the Phantom. But the assassin had been expecting this move. His voice came from a completely different location than before. Clever, but pointless. I know this building better than you do. Sarah realized with growing dread that the Phantom had been here for days, studying the layout and preparing for this encounter. He knew every hiding place, every escape route, every tactical advantage the room offered. The sound of boots in the corridor announced the arrival of additional guards. Dr. Petrov's voice carried clearly. Seal the floor. Nobody gets in or out until this is finished. Sarah was now trapped between enemy guards and the Phantom, with a seriously wounded Major Volkov somewhere in the darkness. The mission was falling apart, but she wasn't ready to give up yet. Another crossbow bolt whispered past her ear, so close she could feel the fletching brush her hair. The Phantom was closing in, using the darkness and his knowledge of the room to systematically eliminate her hiding places. You know, the Phantom said conversationally, I've studied your methods extensively. The compound raid was particularly impressive. 3 generals in one operation. Most people couldn't have planned something that complex. Sarah didn't respond. Talking would give away her position, and she needed every advantage she could get. But you made one critical error, the Phantom continued. You assumed that eliminating the leadership would end the war. What you actually did was create a power vacuum that more dangerous people are rushing to fill. A new sound reached Sarah's ears. The helicopter was directly overhead now, and she could hear rappelling equipment being deployed. Her extraction team was moving into position, but they couldn't reach her until she got to the roof. The people who hired me aren't interested in continuing this conflict, the Phantom explained. They want it ended quickly and decisively. Your death will accomplish that goal. Sarah made her decision. Instead of continuing to hide, she would go on the offensive. The Phantom expected her to remain defensive, trying to avoid his attacks until help arrived. He wouldn't expect her to charge directly at him. She burst from cover and sprinted toward the sound of his voice. The move caught him off guard, and she managed to tackle him before he could reload his crossbow. They crashed into a medical cart, scattering equipment across the floor. The Phantom was smaller than Sarah had expected, but incredibly strong and fast. He broke her grapple and rolled away before she could secure a submission hold. In the darkness, she caught a glimpse of lean features and cold eyes that reflected no emotion whatsoever. Impressive, he said as they circled each other. But futile. He produced a combat knife from somewhere and moved with the fluid grace of someone who had trained for decades in close combat. Sarah grabbed a broken piece of medical equipment to use as an improvised weapon. Their fight moved across the room as they tested each other's skills. The Phantom was technically perfect, every movement precise and economical. But Sarah fought with desperate creativity, using the environment and her knowledge of the room's layout to offset his superior training. The helicopter was landing on the roof now. Sarah could hear Webb's voice over the radio. Ghost Leader, we are in position for immediate extraction. What's your status? Sarah couldn't respond without giving the Phantom an opening, but she didn't need to. Webb would wait exactly 3 minutes before beginning the emergency extraction protocol. If she wasn't on the roof by then, they would assume she was dead or captured. The Phantom seemed to sense her urgency. His attacks became more aggressive as he tried to end the fight quickly. Sarah gave ground steadily, drawing him toward the shattered window where Webb's sniper team might get a clear shot. But as they fought, Sarah realized something that chilled her to the bone. The Phantom wasn't trying to kill her quickly. He was playing with her, demonstrating his superiority before delivering the final blow. The man's professional pride was going to be her salvation. Sarah feinted toward the window, then reversed direction and grabbed Major Volkov from where he had been hidden behind an overturned bed. The wounded officer was conscious, but weak from blood loss. "Let's discuss terms," she called out to the Phantom. "I have something you need." The Phantom paused his advance. "Major Volkov is irrelevant to my mission." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But he's very relevant to the people who hired you. They want this war ended, right? Volkov is the key to making that happen." She could see the calculation in the Phantom's eyes. His mission was to eliminate her, but his employers would be very interested in capturing the enemy's remaining military leadership. "What do you propose?" he asked. Sarah smiled grimly. "Single combat. Winner takes both the bounty and the prisoner. Loser dies." The proposal was insane, but it bought her the time she needed. Webb's 3-minute deadline was approaching, and she could hear movement on the roof as her extraction team prepared for emergency departure. "Acceptable terms," the Phantom agreed, "though you realize you have no chance of victory." "We'll see about that," Sarah replied. She released Volkov and stepped into the center of the room. The Phantom approached with his knife held in a perfect combat grip. Sarah drew her own blade, a tactical knife that had served her through dozens of missions. They circled each other in the darkness, two predators preparing for a fight that only one would survive. Through the shattered window, Sarah could see the lights of the helicopter on the roof above. The Phantom attacked first, a lightning-fast thrust aimed at her heart. Sarah deflected the blade and countered with a slash that barely missed his throat. The fight was faster and more brutal than their previous grappling, both combatants using lethal techniques with deadly precision. Sarah was bleeding from multiple cuts when she heard the helicopter engines change pitch. Webb was beginning the departure sequence. If she didn't reach the roof within the next minute, her extraction team would leave without her. The Phantom seemed to sense her desperation. "Your ride is leaving," he observed calmly. "Perhaps you should have accepted Dr. Petrov's offer." Sarah didn't waste breath on a response. Instead, she grabbed a broken piece of medical equipment and hurled it at the room's remaining intact window. The glass shattered, creating a second opening and confusing the Phantom's defensive calculations. Using the distraction, Sarah lunged forward in a desperate attack that left her completely exposed. The Phantom's blade sliced across her ribs, but her own knife found its mark. The assassin stumbled backward with a look of surprise on his face. "Impossible," he whispered as he collapsed. Sarah didn't wait to confirm the kill. She grabbed Major Volkov and dragged him toward the shattered window as the helicopter lifted off from the roof. Webb's voice crackled over the radio. "Ghost Leader, we cannot maintain position. Enemy reinforcements approaching from multiple vectors." Sarah looked up at the helicopter hovering 20 feet above the window. A rope dropped down, but she would have to jump to reach it while carrying Volkov. The drop to the ground was 40 feet onto concrete. Miss the rope, and the mission would end in disaster. Behind her, she could hear guards pounding on the room's door. Dr. Petrov was shouting orders, and more soldiers were moving through the building. She had perhaps 30 seconds before the room was overrun. Major Volkov was barely conscious, but he managed to whisper something that made Sarah's blood run cold. The Phantom was not working alone. His partner is already at your base. Sarah's mind raced as she processed this information. If the Phantom had a partner, and that partner was at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, then her entire unit was walking into a trap. She grabbed the rope with one hand and Volkov with the other as the helicopter began to climb. The window frame rushed past as they were pulled up into the night sky. Below, muzzle flashes lit up the medical facility as guards opened fire on the escaping aircraft. But Sarah's thoughts were focused on the base and the soldiers under her command. The mission had been a success. She had eliminated the Phantom and captured Major Volkov. But if his partner was already infiltrating her headquarters, the victory might be meaningless. As the helicopter turned toward home, Sarah keyed her radio to the emergency frequency. "All stations, this is Ghost Leader. Execute Protocol 7 immediately. The base is compromised." The war was far from over, but the rules had just changed again. And Sarah Martinez was about to discover that some enemies were far more dangerous than others. The helicopter raced through the mountain valleys as Sarah's radio crackled with emergency reports from Forward Operating Base Sentinel. Protocol 7 was the base's highest alert status, designed to counter infiltration attempts and sabotage operations. But as the communications traffic increased, Sarah realized the situation was far worse than she had anticipated. "Ghost Leader, this is Falcon Base," came Lieutenant Santos's voice over the radio. "We have multiple security breaches detected. Someone has been accessing classified files for the past 6 hours. They knew our security codes." Sarah's blood chilled as she processed this information. Major Volkov stirred weakly beside her, his shoulder wound bleeding through the field dressings. The man who might hold the key to ending this war was barely conscious, but his earlier warning about the Phantom's partner echoed in her mind. "How many casualties?" Sarah asked into her radio. "None reported yet," Santos replied. "But that's what's strange. Whoever is inside isn't trying to kill anyone. They're gathering intelligence and planting listening devices. We found bugs in the command center, the communications room, and your personal quarters." Captain Webb leaned forward from the pilot's seat. "ETA to base is 15 minutes. But if someone has compromised our security, landing there could be walking into a trap." Sarah studied the tactical display on her tablet. The base's defensive systems were still operational, but an insider with knowledge of their protocols could bypass most of the security measures. More importantly, if the infiltrator had accessed her personal files, they would know about her backup extraction sites and emergency protocols. "Change of plans," Sarah decided. "Take us to Extraction Point Charlie. We'll establish a temporary command post and assess the situation from there." Extraction Point Charlie was a hidden facility carved into the mountainside 20 miles from the main base. Sarah had established it months ago as a fallback position, but she had never expected to need it this soon. The facility was basic but secure, with its own communications equipment and enough supplies to sustain a small team for several weeks. As the helicopter approached the landing zone, Sarah's radio erupted with new traffic. General Thompson's voice cut through the static. "Ghost Leader, we have identified the infiltrator. It's Colonel Patricia Hayes." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. Colonel Hayes was her intelligence officer, the person responsible for analyzing enemy communications and planning operations. She had access to every classified file on the base, every operational plan, every piece of sensitive intelligence. "How long has she been compromised?" Sarah asked. "Unknown," Thompson replied. "We discovered communication equipment in her quarters that wasn't part of our standard issue. She's been transmitting data to an unknown recipient for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Hayes had been present for every briefing about the bounty situation. She knew about Sarah's mission to capture Volkov, the location of Webb sniper teams, and the timing of the extraction. The Phantom hadn't been waiting at the medical facility by chance. He had been led there by inside information. The helicopter touched down at Extraction Point Charlie as the sun was beginning to rise. Sarah and Webb carried Major Volkov into the facility while Dr. Foster checked his vital signs. The enemy officer was stable, but weak from blood loss and the stress of extraction. "We need to interrogate him immediately," Sarah told Dr. Foster. "He might have information about Hayes or other infiltrators." Dr. Foster nodded grimly. "I can keep him conscious and responsive for about an hour. After that, he'll need surgery or he'll go into shock." Sarah activated the facility's communication system and established contact with the main base. The situation there was rapidly evolving as security teams searched for additional compromised personnel and equipment. "Colonel Hayes is gone," General Thompson reported. "She disappeared during the Protocol 7 lockdown. We found evidence that she's been copying files for weeks, including operational plans and personnel records." "What about the listening devices?" Sarah asked. "We found 17 so far, all state-of-the-art equipment. They were placed to monitor key personnel conversations and strategic planning sessions. Whoever Hayes was working for, They have extremely detailed intelligence about our operations. Sarah felt a cold fury building in her chest. Hayes had betrayed everyone on the base, compromising missions and putting lives at risk. But more immediately, her betrayal meant that the enemy knew about Sarah's current location and operational capabilities. "Sir," Sarah said into the radio, "I recommend immediate evacuation of the base. If Hayes has been sharing our intelligence, the enemy knows about our defensive positions and escape routes. We need to assume they're planning a major assault." "Already in progress," Thompson replied. "But we have a problem. Satellite imagery shows enemy forces moving to surround all our known extraction points. They're trying to trap us in the mountains." Sarah studied the tactical map on her tablet. The enemy was being unusually aggressive, deploying forces that had previously been committed to other fronts. Someone was coordinating a massive operation to eliminate her and destroy her unit. Major Volkov stirred weakly on the medical cot. Sarah approached him with Dr. Foster close behind, monitoring his condition. The enemy officer's eyes were clear despite his injuries, and he watched Sarah with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "Major," Sarah said quietly, "I want to make you an offer. Information in exchange for medical care and safe passage to a prisoner exchange." Volkov coughed painfully. "What makes you think I would betray my own forces?" "Because your own forces just tried to have you killed," Sarah replied. "The Phantom wasn't just hunting me. His orders were to eliminate both of us to prevent exactly this conversation." She could see uncertainty flicker across Volkov's face. The wounded officer was intelligent enough to realize that his survival might not be in his commander's best interests. A captured major could reveal too much sensitive information under interrogation. "What do you want to know?" Volkov asked finally. "Who is Colonel Hayes working for? And how many other infiltrators are in my organization?" Volkov smiled weakly. "Hayes is not working for us. She's employed by the same people who hired the Phantom. Private interests who profit from prolonged conflict." The revelation sent shockwaves through Sarah's understanding of the situation. The bounty on her head wasn't just about military objectives. Someone was manipulating both sides of the conflict to maximize their own profits from arms sales and reconstruction contracts. "How long have they been planning this?" Sarah asked. "Months," Volkov replied. "Maybe longer. They needed the war to continue indefinitely, but your recent successes threatened to end it too quickly. Eliminating you became essential to their business model." Dr. Foster checked Volkov's pulse and whispered to Sarah, "His blood pressure is dropping. Whatever else you need to know, ask it now." "Who else is working for them?" Sarah pressed. "I don't know specific names," Volkov admitted, "but the operation extends beyond your unit. They have people in both military commands, political leadership, and civilian contractors. The war is being orchestrated by people who see it as a profitable enterprise." The implications were staggering. Sarah had been fighting what she thought was a conventional military conflict, but the real enemy was a shadowy network of profiteers who were manipulating both sides for financial gain. Her radio crackled with urgent traffic from the main base. "Ghost Leader, enemy armor is approaching from 3 directions. We're beginning emergency evacuation procedures. Recommend you stay clear of the area." Sarah's tactical training kicked in as she assessed their options. The temporary facility could sustain them for several days, but eventually they would need to link up with friendly forces or establish a new base of operations. More immediately, they needed to get Major Volkov proper medical care before his condition deteriorated further. "Webb," she called to the pilot, "how much fuel do we have?" "About 3 hours of flight time," he replied. "Enough to reach the coast if we need to extract completely." Sarah considered their options. Retreating to the coast would mean abandoning the mountain region to enemy forces, but stay might mean walking into a trap set by Hayes' employers. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and she needed to make decisions with incomplete information. "Dr. Foster, can Volkov survive a 3-hour flight?" The doctor checked the major's condition again. "With the right medication and some luck, yes. But He needs surgery soon, or the internal bleeding will kill him. Sarah made her decision. We're going to take a risk. There's a field hospital about 2 hours south of here, run by the International Medical Corps. They're supposed to be neutral in this conflict. Supposed to be, Webb repeated skeptically. But if Hayes's people have infiltrated international organizations too, then we deal with that when it happens, Sarah replied. Right now, our priority is keeping Volkov alive long enough to extract useful intelligence. As they prepared for departure, Sarah's radio picked up new communications traffic. The voice was unfamiliar, but the encryption signature matched Colonel Hayes's equipment. Ghost Leader, this is your former intelligence officer. I know you can hear this transmission. Sarah keyed her radio to respond. Hayes, I should have seen your betrayal coming. This isn't personal, Sarah, Hayes replied. It's business. The war needs to continue for at least another 18 months to meet our investors' profit projections. Your recent successes have threatened that timeline. So you decided to have me killed? Among other measures, yes. But my employers are prepared to offer you an alternative arrangement. Join us, and you'll receive resources and funding beyond anything your current command can provide. Refuse, and we'll hunt you across every continent until you're dead. Sarah felt cold fury building in her chest. Hayes was offering her a chance to join the conspiracy that had prolonged this war and caused thousands of unnecessary deaths. Here's my counteroffer, Sarah replied. I'm going to hunt down every member of your organization and expose this entire conspiracy, starting with you. I expected that response, Hayes said calmly, which is why I've already taken steps to ensure your cooperation. Check your secure communications for a message that just arrived. Sarah's tablet chimed with an incoming secure transmission. When she opened the file, her blood turned to ice. The message contained photographs of soldiers from her unit who had been captured during the base evacuation. Webb sniper team, Lieutenant Santos, Dr. Foster's medical staff, at least 20 of her people were being held prisoner. They're alive for now, Hayes continued over the radio. But their continued survival depends on your willingness to negotiate. Sarah stared at the photographs of her captured soldiers. These people had followed her through impossible missions, trusted her with their lives, and now they were paying the price for her war against corruption. What do you want? Sarah asked quietly. Surrender yourself, and Major Volkov, at coordinates I'm transmitting now. Your people will be released unharmed, and this unfortunate situation can be resolved peacefully. The coordinates appeared on Sarah's tablet, an abandoned mining facility in the valley below their current position. According to the tactical map, it was an ideal location for an ambush with no cover and multiple approaches for hostile forces. Webb looked at Sarah with concern. It's obviously a trap. They'll kill you and your people as soon as you arrive. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But if I don't go, my soldiers die anyway. Dr. Foster spoke up from beside Volkov's cot. There might be another option. The Major has been trying to tell us something. Sarah turned to Volkov, who was struggling to speak despite his weakened condition. What is it, Major? The mining facility, he whispered. It's not abandoned. My forces established a communications center there last month. If Hayes is using it as a meeting point she doesn't know about our presence. Sarah's mind raced through the tactical implications. If enemy forces were already at the facility, Hayes might be walking into a trap herself. More importantly, it might provide an opportunity to rescue her captured soldiers and eliminate the traitors who had compromised her unit. How many soldiers? Sarah asked. Full company, Volkov replied weakly. About 100 men plus equipment. Sarah looked at Webb and Dr. Foster. Change of plans. We're not surrendering to Hayes. We're going to use her trap against her. Ow! Webb asked. We're 3 people and a wounded prisoner against an entire company of enemy soldiers plus Hayes's mercenary team. Sarah smiled grimly as she began formulating a plan. That's exactly what makes this possible. Everyone expects us to either surrender or run away. Nobody expects us to attack a superior force. She opened a secure communication channel to any remaining friendly forces in the area. All stations, This is Ghost Leader. I am initiating Operation Thunderbolt. Any units receiving this transmission, stand by for targeting data." The response was immediate but weak. Scattered elements of her unit were still operational in the mountains, including some heavy weapons teams that had evaded capture during the base evacuation. "Ghost Leader, this is Hammer 2. We have a mortar team in position with limited ammunition. Send your fire mission." Sarah studied the map of the mining facility. If she could coordinate the attack properly, she might be able to rescue her soldiers and eliminate Hayes in one operation. But the timing would have to be perfect, and one mistake would result in the deaths of everyone she was trying to save. "Listen carefully," she told her remaining forces. "We're going to hit them with everything we have, but not until I give the signal. Hayes thinks she's setting a trap for me. Instead, she's about to learn why nobody puts a bounty on the ghost of the Highlands." As the helicopter lifted off toward the mining facility, Sarah checked her weapons and prepared for the most dangerous mission of her career. 20 of her soldiers were counting on her to get them out alive. The war itself hung in the balance, and Colonel Patricia Hayes was about to discover that betraying Sarah Martinez had been the biggest mistake of her life. The mining facility sprawled across the valley floor like a mechanical spider, its abandoned equipment casting long shadows in the morning sunlight. Sarah Martinez crouched behind a ridge overlooking the complex, studying the tactical situation through her field glasses. What she saw confirmed Major Volkov's intelligence. The facility was far from abandoned. Enemy soldiers moved with practiced efficiency between the buildings, establishing defensive positions and setting up communication equipment. Sarah counted at least 80 personnel, exactly as Volkov had predicted. But more importantly, she could see a cluster of vehicles near the main administrative building where her captured soldiers were most likely being held. "Ghost Leader, this is Hammer 2, crackled the voice of Sergeant Rodriguez through her radio. "We're in position with 4 60mm mortars, limited to 20 rounds total." "Acknowledged, Hammer 2, Sarah replied. "Hold position until my signal." Captain Webb crawled up beside her, carrying a sniper rifle and looking grim. "I've identified Hayes. She's in the administration building with what looks like a private security team. Maybe 8 mercenaries, all professional grade." Sarah adjusted her binoculars to focus on the building Webb had indicated. Through a window on the second floor, she could clearly see Colonel Patricia Hayes standing beside a communications console. The woman who had betrayed her entire unit looked calm and confident, completely unaware that she was being watched. "Any sign of our people?" Sarah asked. "Negative on visual confirmation," Webb replied. "But there are guards posted around the old processing plant. That's probably where they're being held." Dr. Foster's voice came through the radio from their concealed position. "Major Volkov is stable for now, but his condition is deteriorating. We need to move soon, or he won't survive to provide additional intelligence." Sarah made her decision. The rescue operation would have 3 phases: eliminate the enemy's command structure, extract her captured soldiers, and escape before reinforcements could arrive. It was ambitious to the point of being reckless, but her people were counting on her. "All stations, this is Ghost Leader," she broadcast on her unit's emergency frequency. "Operation Thunderbolt commences in 10 minutes. Hammer 2, I need precision strikes on the communications array and the motor pool. Raven team, provide overwatch and eliminate sentries on the perimeter. All other units, stand by for my signal to extract the hostages." The next few minutes passed with agonizing slowness as Sarah's scattered forces moved into position. She had perhaps 30 soldiers available for the operation, barely a quarter of her full unit strength. Against 100 enemy personnel plus Hayes' mercenary team, the odds were terrible. But Sarah had built her reputation on achieving victory against impossible odds. Her radio crackled with confirmation signals as her teams reported ready. Through her binoculars, Sarah could see Hayes pacing in the administration building, occasionally speaking into a handheld radio. The traitor was coordinating something, probably the final preparations for Sarah's expected surrender. "Ghost Leader, this is Echo 4. came a new voice on the radio. Lieutenant Maria Santos, Saris,